This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and joining me live from Addison, Texas is former WCW Tag Team Champion, 15-time WWE Hardcore Champion, and he's a second-generation superstar, Shawn Stasiak, Dr. Shawn Stasiak. How are you doing today, sir?
How are you, Devin? Thanks for having me on. We finally connected here.
Yes, and for fans that are just checking in and didn't see the interview I did with Shawn a week or so ago, he did do about a half-hour interview with me about his plane ride from hell experience. So check that out. It's on my channel, The Hannibal TV, which I hope you're all subscribed to, as well as Dr. Shawn's channel, which he's just starting off. This interview is actually going to be up there too as well. So I encourage people that want to follow him to subscribe to his channel as well.
Yeah, actually, Devin, I appreciate that. It's actually, and I changed it a million times, so that's probably where you're even confused. I'm going to stay with what it is now. I like that movie Wayne's World. Remember Wayne's World with the Canadian actor Michael Myers? I thought Shawn's World, right? So now I've changed it to Shawn Stasiak's World, and that's what it is. So that's the YouTube channel. But yeah, as you know, it's in its embryonic stages, and I appreciate all the love and support I can get.
Yeah, very good. And by the way, did you like the second Wayne's World? I liked the first one, but the second one didn't quite do it for me.
I always like the originals. It seems like when they do sequels, they're just never as good as the first originals, So same with the Austin Power movies. I followed that as well. I'm a Michael Myers fan. I think he's a funny actor, but I always like the originals the best. It seems like they can't duplicate or triplicate the original.
And fans, why he brings up Michael Myers is Canadian. Actually, Shawn is Canadian as well, even though he lives in Texas now. I don't blame him. Because 6 months out of the year here, it's very cold. But the first time I kind of found Shawn interesting was when I was in high school. I was a high school wrestler, and I won OFSA twice, which is like the equivalent of the state championships. And I remember going through the history of who won that, and Shawn actually won that prior to me. So I remember thinking, oh man, this is so cool. A WWE wrestler actually won this tournament as well. So I know you went on and wrestled in college a bit too. Could you start off by telling us a little bit about your amateur wrestling career?
Yeah, I had a pretty extensive amateur career. And it's funny with OFSA, when you mentioned that, that was such a special tournament for me, because the year before I had made it to the finals and I was actually up 5-1 with like 15 seconds left. And somehow I was a lighter heavyweight at the time, my junior year, This guy had won it a couple times before that. And I was on my way to victory to be the first ever for my school, White Oak Secondary School in Oakville, Ontario, to be the first OFSA champion ever. And I got rolled up and stuck and pinned with like 5 seconds left. It was the most depressing, devastating thing in my life that I ever experienced. But I bounced back the next year, and I won the tournament. So I was the very first OFSA champion for wrestling for my high school, White Oak Secondary School. But yeah, I went on to Boise State University, was their starting heavyweight for 3 years. We're in the Pac-10 conference at the time. It was Division I. So we competed at all the biggest tournaments: Iowa, Oklahoma, Arizona, the Las Vegas Invitational, Midlands in I think it was Chicago. So yeah, I had a successful amateur career. Of course, talk is cheap, but you always look back in hindsight and think, man, I just wish I had the mind I have today as a man back then. I had a little second guessing, and you doubt yourself at times, and there's matches that you can never get back that haunt you. Like I'm literally haunted by certain matches that I can never get back. And I think that's what drives me to this very day to keep fit and to keep pushing myself in the gym and to stay in shape and compete with myself, So I guess there's there's a silver lining in coming up short certain matches and tournaments that you might have not won or didn't place well. I mean, had many of those too. So yeah, I'm very, very grateful for my amateur wrestling experience. And you find there's all those amateur wrestlers out there, stick to it, win, lose, or draw. You'll use this experience for the rest of your life, in business, in life. Because I say that the world, as a inspirational speaker, you know, life is a wrestling match, and that is your biggest opponent. So having that wrestling background, that pedigree, if you can create one, is great, because you learn discipline and loyalty, integrity, you know, just hard work ethic. I don't know any other type of species on the planet, not to put down any other athletes or sports, but boy, wrestling is very gritty. In fact, one of the terms is, as you know, Devin, is embrace the grind. And so you probably find yourself from your background, and I believe you're a Canadian champion, apart from being an OFSA champion. I took second and third in the Canadian National Championship Espoir for my age group at the time. So my whole point is, I had a successful career. I was a 2-time Pac-10 silver medalist, and then I went to the NCAA tournament twice. And it's amazing. You look at the brackets, and it's like the people that I lost to by 1 point, you know, give that tournament all over again, and you very well could find yourself in the final or competing for the top, you know, maybe a bronze medal. Everybody was so closely matched, and it was so competitive, you know. Yeah, I was ranked top 12 in the country my last senior year. But yeah, I'm very grateful for the experience. So blessed that I had that opportunity.
And we have another thing in common now that you mention it. I was the first OFSA champion for my high school too. And for fans that aren't familiar with that, who aren't from Ontario, this is like a massive tournament. I believe it's a 32-man tournament over a 2-day thing. Yep. So it's, as a high school wrestler, to do that in Ontario is more prestigious than in any other province, just because Ontario is so populated. Did you find that you had extra pressure on you because your father was a world champion wrestler, and you kind of felt that you had to do well in amateur wrestling because you're the son of this legendary pro wrestler?
You know, actually, Devin, no, I didn't, because back then, you know, when I was in high school, my buddies were all football players. I was like the only wrestler in the gang. And we would watch WWF at the time. We work out together on the weekends, and, you know, we'd all have our respective sports and training during the week or whatever. But I never really had that pressure, because it was two separate things. Maybe I don't know, maybe inadvertently or subconsciously I put pressure on. I tend to do that anyway. I put way more pressure on myself in my professional wrestling career than I did my amateur career, because they're two separate things. But I see why you would think that or ask that question. No, not really. Not that I remember it was anything really a prevalent thought or anything, you know, that I put extra. I put pressure on myself because I just wanted to win OFSA. That was my first real dream goal, because the heavyweight, he was from Jamaica. His name was Mike Curlew, and I saw him at the OFSA championships where he was in the final, and he lost in the final. He did great. I mean, you know, you placed in that tournament, you succeeded. But I was so devastated and so depressed for him, because I had roomed with him, trained with him. He's one that kind of got me, took special time with me to help develop me. And when I saw that, the whole build up to the finals, like just the ceremony, just just everything that leading up to that final, the finals of all the wrestlers, and then seeing Mike lose in the final, I was so devastated. I said to myself, I'm going to win OFSA next year. I want to be an OFSA champion. And so I think in honor of him and honor of myself and our school, I was just so inspired by that whole experience, not just the match itself, and not just the heartbreak, of Mike coming up short, but it was really just a whole experience. I said, I want to be that guy in the ceremony and leading up to that. And sure enough, I was the next year. Of course, like I said in my story, I fell short. I ended up losing in the final, but then the following year, and ironically enough, I know you're from Ottawa, Devin, but the guy that I had defeated in the final, his name was Joey Ducharme. and he was from Ottawa, I believe. I'm pretty certain of that. So there's a, I don't know if that name rings a bell, but that's probably way before your time. But I put more pressure on myself once I got into my professional wrestling career. I had just lost my father not too long prior to me finally, going after that WWE dream. And that's where I put pressure on myself. And I think that's kind of what it backfired for me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. You obviously went to college. As you said, you wrestled fairly successfully in college. Was the plan always to be a pro wrestler? Like, were you a fan of it growing up? Or was it just, I'm the son of this legend, I can probably get in because it's easier for second generation stars? I'm going to give this a shot and try and make some money. So was it more money, or was it more like a passion?
It was a passion because, and I think that's what distracted me as an amateur wrestler in college, because I think at times I struggled because I had wrestled freestyle up in Canada, as you're familiar with. And then when you get down to the States, for college Division I, it's folk style, right? It's a little bit different rules. And so there was a little bit of an acclimation period there for me. And I think I just was a little distracted because I became such a huge pro wrestling fan. This is right during the Monday Night Wars, even before that. I was always watching it, renting tapes, watching old matches. I was a huge Mark fan for guys like Rick Rude, Roddy Piper, Jimmy Snuka, just some of the legends. Ultimate Warrior, of course. I mean, I know that he's a pretty polarizing figure, but that kind of inspired him and Sting. The face paint, the theatrics, the larger than life comic book come to life characters is what really inspired me. I was also a Kiss fan as a kid, the group Kiss with the face paint. I love face paint, theatrics, I love Halloween, Big Kid. That's what inspired my alter ego character Phobia. We can get into that a little bit later. But I was such a fan that I think I distracted myself by even talking myself out of really. I had stages where I was struggling to want to even get through the Division I wrestling program with Boise State. I don't know. I think I was just so focused on, I knew as soon as I graduated, I was going to go try out for pro wrestling. So I think in essence, that kind of distracted me. And looking back, I would tell any collegiate athlete, if you have a desire or a dream, now if you're in football, baseball, basketball, generally, if you have a passion for that to play pro, you're going to focus on your current sport because that's what that is. But with amateur wrestling versus pro wrestling, it's really, there's some similarities and some parallels there, some elements that are similar, but at the end of the day, it's a completely different business. One's sports entertainment and one's real wrestling. So I would just say focus on that wrestling career, get everything you can out of that experience because you'll never get it back. And trust me, I look back and I've had regrets for years that have haunted me that I didn't give 110% at moments of my Division I amateur wrestling career.
And you know what? You probably could have gone back to Canada after that and probably done the Olympic trials or something in freestyle wrestling and won, because the competition level is so much better in Division I in the US than it is in the CIAU in Canada. But you went on to WWE and you took a different path. So maybe you could tell us about that, because I know you were signed very young at the time without a lot of experience, which was rare at that time.
Actually, Devin, that's funny. I actually was not that young. I was actually older because I took some time off in between. I went to a junior college out of high school in Canada, and then I ended up coming back home, and man, I ended up quitting school and wrestling and everything for like about a year and a half, almost 2 years. My dad wanted to kill me, but I was younger then, in my early 20s, and I ended up working for a Xerox color toner plant in Oakville, Ontario, for a 22-year-old kid at the time back in, 1991, 92. I still think I made almost $50,000, which isn't bad for a 22-year-old kid in a time of recession in Canada at the time. But it was a factory job, and, it took about a year and a half where I realized, I cheated myself. I need to get back to school. You know, I need to get back to wrestling and back to what I was pursuing. So, you know, I actually graduated, I think I was 20, I want to say I was 26 or 27. And I actually didn't get started. Now, I had 10 untrained professional wrestling matches in Portland, Oregon in the summer of 1996 when Kurt Angle won his Olympic gold medal. And of course, I was following him on the Olympics, and I had met Kurt, you know, prior at the NCAA tournament, you know, different tournaments. I'd run into him and see him at the airport at times. And later, you know, lo and behold, we ended up being training partners, traveling partners, and I would be his first debut televised WWE wrestling match, you know. But I actually got started a little bit later, and it was kind of, you know, most second generation wrestlers are generally get started a little bit earlier because, you know, it's in their blood. They grow up around it and they get into it earlier. For me, it came a little bit later. So I didn't get to the WWE training facility in Stanford. It was I had my tryout in October of 97. And by January of 98, I was part of the infamous Funking Dojo camps with Dr. Tom Pritchard and Dory Funk Jr., who actually officially trained me, apart from Paul Orndorff a couple years later at the power plant when I went to WCW. But, you know, that's when we had those camps, and all these guys would be flown in from all over, you know, and that's where I met the likes of, you know, Jay Resso, or, you know, Christian, Edge, Test, a lot of the Canadian guys, Mark Merrow, Ahmed Johnson, John Tenta, the Earthquake. I mean, the list goes on and on. Val Venus. So I was exposed to those camps with not too much training under my, like, official pro wrestling training under my belt. And those guys that came in, they had already been in the business for 3, 4, 5, maybe even more years. Some of the guys would come back after being injured, that they wanted to get the ring rust off, so they sent them to these camps. So I think I answered your question. I think I went down a rabbit hole there a little bit, but that's kind of, as far as training for me, I didn't get started till a little bit later, you know, my later 20s.
And you mentioned that you didn't have much experience and you were actually trained by Dory Funk Jr. and Tom Pritchard. I guess you came up with this phobia character and you sent a bunch of vignettes to WWE and you received those tryouts based on these vignettes. Could you explain that?
Yeah. So again, big fan of you know, the face painted, larger than life characters, Sting, Ultimate Warrior, Road Warriors. So I was, you know, going to Boise State in Idaho, and there's no pro wrestling schools there. And so, like I said, I'm a big fan, or a big kid rather, you know, when you know, now, like Halloween season, right? I feel like I'm getting giddy just thinking about it now. So what I did is I created a great rapport with the local news station that was in Boise that would cover a lot of the sports. And so I basically connected with them and said, hey, listen, I've got a character idea that I'm working on. I'd like to get some footage that I can use to send to WWE to try to get a tryout, to have them take a look at me. I think I also sent it to WCW, Jody Hamilton, I believe, who we just lost recently, you know, rest his soul. So I was, you know, sent tapes to both places, and I was in contact with both places. But my heart really was with WWE because that's what I grew up on. That's the only place I ever wanted to work for, you know. So with the Halloween, you know, every year that would come around, I got tired of playing other pro wrestlers. You know, one year I'm Ultimate Warrior, the next year I'm Rick Rude, a chubby Rick Rude, you know, at the time. And finally, I decided, you know, I want to do something of my own. I want to create my own character. And again, I was very inspired by these larger than life theatrical characters. So the story goes that the spring before the Halloween that was coming up, I was in my dorm room. And you can check this out on my website. It's phobiatv.com. It's FOBIA-TV.com. Outdated website, but it's soon to be revamped. I keep saying that, but we're going to get to it. But the story goes is that, in the dormitory, it was during the exam finals, and it was a stressful time. And there was no air conditioning in the dorm room. So you have to open your window and have fans on so you can keep yourself, temperature control, right? Keep yourself somewhat cool and comfortable. Well, for 2 weeks, I kept, feeling like something was like debris on my face, at night. And I would turn, toss and turn and kind of doing this to my face, feeling something kind of, I don't know, it was like debris or something was like itching my face. And then I noticed that I started breaking out with what seemed to be pimples or something, and I thought they were just stress from school, stress bumps or whatever, I called them at the time. And I was feeling nauseous. I was feeling sick for like 2 weeks. Just wasn't feeling myself, wasn't feeling right. And so I decided to go to the local student clinic and to get checked out. And the nurse came by and she did something like a cotton swab or something with one of the bumps on my face and came back, basically said, Shawn, those aren't stress bumps, those are spider bites. And then I put 2 and 2 together thinking, oh my God, man, don't tell me I've been attacked by spiders for the last 2 weeks, because that's what I'm feeling on my face at night, Lo and behold, I get to my dorm room, I rip my room apart thinking maybe there's a spider nest or something, or where are these spiders coming from? Sure enough, I ripped my bed that was kind of attached to the wall out, looked underneath the bed, and there was a full-blown spider nest underneath my bed. That's a true story. So I was petrified, man. I was freaked out. I could never go back in that room again. I had to stay with a friend to finish up my exams that year. So then the following year, I decided to create a character, and I said, well, what could cover my face and look cool? And I thought, hey, 8 legs to a spider. Let's, so I built up the face, and sure enough, when I did the first paint job, I'm staring in the mirror, I see my reflection, and the one word that muttered under my voice was just the one word, phobia. I just muttered it. And even though we know that fear of spiders is arachnophobia, but phobia was just the one word that came out of my mouth. And so I used this character and would create like a PSA for the local kids, in the community: safe trick-or-treating, don't talk to strangers, be accompanied by a parent, check your candy, all the PSA good community insights or such advice, And I used that footage from Channel 7 News to send to WWE. And so they got the tape. This is back in the VHS tapes, those big blocky tapes. And I received a phone call a couple of weeks later from Bruce Pritchard that they were interested in having me come in to take a look at me. So the phobia character essentially is what got my pro wrestling tryout. We never used the character in pro wrestling. There was a time when Hogan was with TNA, and Hogan and I had stayed in touch, and he was interested in possibly bringing it aboard. He said he needed a nemesis for Sting. I was like, are you kidding me? That's one of my teenage idols, phobia versus Sting. Heck yeah, I'm in, but that never came to fruition. And I was really disappointed at the time because, with that business, Devin, I mean, who knows for what rhyme or reason things happen, things don't happen. There's so many variables as to, politics, who knows, but it didn't come to fruition. And I was very disappointed at the time. But then years later, fast forward, I realized that it's a blessing that it never did come to fruition, because to me, phobia means so much to me, because really it's a theatrical expression of me, Shawn. And it really represents, the spider emblem represents all fears. Fears of failure, fears of rejection, fears of success. Sometimes we have fears of success. Sounds funny, right? But we do. Fear of change. So we as a society, we live in fear, right? Especially now with this pandemic and the way our world's changed. There's just a lot of uncertainty and change, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety that's going on. So this character to me is much more, and no offense to any face-painted wrestling character, but it's much more than that, than just wrestling. It's bigger. It would fall into the lines of I would say DC Comics, more of a kind of a comic book alter ego, Dr. Shawn. And so what's cool about it is it's so real and it's so near and dear to my heart, because it represents what started out as a Halloween joke and a PSA on local Channel 7 News that got my WWE tryout initially. Never became a wrestling character, but it and you always ask yourself, why? How come this didn't happen? You know, and I felt haunted by it. How come that never came to fruition for a couple of years, and then realize, you know what, it just means so much more than just, you know, because chances are if it would have become a wrestling character, who knows if it would have been promoted right. It could have just been, you know, washed up like so many of them, and just, you know, died. Now I get to do something with it so much bigger and reach mainstream and audience in its message, which means face your fear and own your life. Because too many times we're shackled and imprisoned ourselves with fear in our own minds. And so the character is really a theatrical expression of that message. And I've been working on some different projects. I've done some short films with it, some different video projects. I've got a big vision with it, some comic book stuff. And so stay tuned for that. That's coming in the very near future. Do some big things with it.
So were you disappointed at the time when they just brought you in as Shawn Stasiak and didn't use this character? I know in retrospect, because of that run, you're probably glad they didn't. But how did they approach you with the character that they ultimately used for you at that time? And what were your thoughts on the situation?
Well, Devin, really, no, I was, you know, when I got to Stanford, we tried it out. You know, one time I had done the face paint, did the whole thing, and had a little practice match. In fact, I worked with Crash Holly. God rest his soul too, man. So many of our brothers, right, have passed before us. It's just, it's amazing. But I had no direction with it at the time. I didn't really have a lot of, I didn't have a lot of psychology behind the character as a wrestler. So it really didn't connect. You know, I think we all knew in the tryout, it's just like, I don't think this is really the right fit for me. And so I just put phobia on the shelf, you know, and I would just bring it, you know, dust it off every once in a while and do some different. And as I got older and years passed, I started to apply more and more meaning and significance to the character and what it stood for. And so it started to reveal itself, and then I have much more clarity. Obviously, I have full clarity of it now. So it wasn't meant to be a wrestling character. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't be. It looks, I mean, it's very reminiscent of a young surfer Sting. It kind of looks like a cross between a, you know, I go to Halloween functions sometimes and I'm walking in the street and they're like, hey, Sting. And I'm like, shut up. It's not Sting. It's phobia, you know, and they, okay, whatever. People want to take pictures with it because it looks cool. It's a cool character, you know, and now that people are going to learn more and more about the meaning and significance behind it, it's even cooler because I wanted to touch people's hearts and I wanted to inspire people to really to help them break through their self-limiting beliefs and become the best versions of themselves, right? But to get through that fear, whatever they're experiencing. But when I was in WWE for the Funking Dojos, I was just trying to develop myself, my skills in the ring, promo skills, just everything, the psychology. I mean, it was so green and new. You know, I had watched wrestling my whole life. I was inspired by it, inspired by all these different wrestlers and characters growing up. I mean, I was meant to at least try the business out. I mean, look, man, when you're a 5-year-old kid and you're trying to sleep and you hear this huge laugh in your living room, giant laugh, and you walk down the stairs only to see your dad with Andre the Giant in your living room drinking beer till 5 a.m. I don't think you have a choice but that you're pretty much adopted in that business, that crazy, wacky world of professional wrestling. So anyway, to get back though to your original question with training and everything, I just wanted to develop myself. I knew at that point I had my work cut out for me because I was around guys that had a few more years experience than me, and I, as competitive natured person as I am, I was like, man, I've got to get caught up to speed. So I wasn't concerned about characters, or I just wanted to get the basics down, just to learn psychology. And I just figured when it's time, you know, we'll figure something out as far as a character. They sent me to Memphis. I worked with Jerry Lawler in that territory. At the time, that was like the farm club to the WWE. I keep saying WWE because that's what it is today. It has been for a while. It was WWF when, you know, you and I remember growing up on it, right? But same promotion. That was a great experience. It was basic, you know, psychology. It's a different style of wrestling. It was much slower paced, but everything, the promos, the storylines, the actual matches with Jerry, they were so easy and so basic psychology, but it was so effective. you know, and Jerry's a master at that. And so it was just an honor to work with a legend, a Hall of Famer like Jerry Lawler. And, you know, I knew that when he worked the angle with me, I felt that I felt special because, you know, he doesn't work just with anybody. So I felt that maybe he was getting the word from the office, hey, work with Shawn, me, to get him TV ready for the main roster. And then, of course, I think it was like maybe 8-9 months later, I got called up to the WWE to be part of the main roster. And this is where I was disappointed initially when it came to a character. I wasn't too fond of the idea of the character Meat.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I guess you just went for it because it's your first character and that was what you're being paid to do. So you just did what you were told, I suppose.
And that's what it is. It's like an actor, you know, you're an actor or an actress and you're given these, it was a role that I was given to play on a TV show. And I looked at it, and at first I was disappointed because my whole life I anticipated, you know, I'm son of a former WWE champion, the 5th wrestler in the history of the WWE become champion. And, you know, I just did not anticipate that I would be given a name, a one-word name, and by the name of Meat of all names. But at that time, you know, the business model was changing. I think Vince was going more towards more, I guess, kind of gimmicky characters, and it was the Attitude Era. I think that was really the start and the birth of the Attitude Era. So I understood that, and you know, I had some advice like with, I think it was Steve Austin and some others that just said, hey kid, just take the role, play it the best you can. It won't last forever. Get as much as you can out of it. And I did the best I could given the cards I was given back then with the character. And hey, I gained some experience and I got my name out there. That's essentially how I got started with that particular company, WWE.
Yeah, you pretty much know they're never going to make you the world champion with a name like Meat. It just, they're not going to build the company around somebody named Meat. So I understand the frustration.
Well, I'm sorry, Devin. I was just going to say, I remember I had heard, because usually when you have your match, and a lot of the boys will look at the monitor in the backstage, and I was out there wrestling my match, and I guess it got back to me that Steve Austin was like, man, that kid's money. I could see me working with him and making a lot of money. I just can't see myself Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Meat at WrestleMania. And I agree with him.
I understand. And would that have been Vince Russo that came up with that gimmick, or was it Bruce Pritchard's idea? Or a collaboration? Maybe Pat Patterson?
Yeah, I think it was actually Ed Ferrara who was co-writing with Vince Russo. So, you know, they're all working together, you know, as a creative team. But I believe it was actually Ed Ferrara. I guess I asked him, I said, how did you come up with that name? Where did that idea even come from? And I don't know if it's from some movie, I don't know, it's a movie with a character called Meat, but he said his dad was on a softball team for years and there was a guy on the team, or maybe it was his dad, but his nickname was Meat for whatever reason. And so they just, strangest names and characters, gimmicks come from the strangest places and ideas in pro wrestling. So that's how that came about, apparently.
Probably one of the things you're most remembered for during that first WWE run was having Kurt Angle's first match. You probably knew him from the training and possibly Memphis, but how was that experience for you?
Oh, it was great, man. I was such a huge, you know, coming from my background as an competitive amateur wrestler, you know, my experience in Canada, and then of course Division I experience. And then following Kurt's career, I was a big fan of Kurt Angle. I was inspired by him. And so when I learned that he was coming to the Funking Dojo for a tryout, I was elated. I was the first one in line to greet him, you know. And so we end up, you know, wrestlers kind of stick together. There's that commonality between us with the amateur wrestling. So he had such a hard work ethic and would just train upon hours of training, like in the gym, cardio, training in the ring. And he asked me, hey, can you meet me here early at the warehouse so we can go over bumps and drills? I said, sure. So I was all about it, man. I was very happy that Kurt Angle was joining us. And of course, Now, I was my rookie year as the character Meat. I was even doing some dark matches too, but they were putting him on dark matches at TV just to get him experience and develop, to get comfortable and acclimated to, you know, a different type of wrestling, obviously, from what his background was. But as you've heard the story, he took on so quickly and became, you know, one of the best, one of the best technical wrestlers ever. And so it was an honor for me to travel with Kurt. We became good friends, and I really enjoyed traveling with him. We were pretty much lived together on the road for, I don't know, maybe 4, 6, 8 months. And then, of course, he had his debut at Survivor Series in Detroit, Joe Louis Arena. And I guess they stuck him with me just because he felt comfortable with me, because we had worked so many dark matches together during our training phase. And we had some great matches too that were never televised or were picked up on camera. We just had a good flow. We were both green, of course, but just athletically and just, I don't know, I think there was a common mutual respect, and we just flowed. You know, they say, you know, pro wrestling is about having the right dance partner. And I had that with Randy Orton too, when we had house shows and whatnot. But really enjoyed working with Kurt Angle, man. It was a great experience.
Now, of course, there's the whole thing with these alleged tape recordings that I guess led to your WWE release after your first run. It made all the news at that time, and it's kind of what you're infamous for. You've already explained to me the misunderstanding of that whole situation, but because all of the fans haven't heard it, could you explain what exactly happened there?
Yeah, this is a story that it's followed me wherever I go. My name is synonymous with the tape recorder incident. It always will be. I finally just, a couple years back, said, Shawn, just embrace it. It's part of your history. You can't rewrite it. It is what it is, right? Basically, long story short, stupid thing to do, looking back now, you know, but I had absolutely no wrongful intent whatsoever. God is my witness. And I think most people, I've shared this story in interviews, and I've had personal conversations about it, you know, and for the most part, I think people know the truth, which is what I'm about to share again here with you. You know, my dad is who bought me my first tape recorder ever, because he knew I was a character as a kid. You know, I used to always imitating people, you know, and acting up. I was just kind of the entertainment bug is in my DNA. It's just who I am, right? And so he's the one that got me my first tape recorder. And then later in life, when I was training with WWE, it was even recommended or suggested by guys like Dory Funk, and even Tom Pritchard, I believe, had said this, but I heard it also through other wrestlers. Hey, man, you're on the road for hours upon hours at a time. You spend a lot of time traveling. Get a tape recorder and work on your promos, work on your craft, perfect your craft, right? You're in a car for hours, you know, tell a story, work on your character. And that's exactly why I had it. Basically, so that's why I had it in the first place, right? I'm traveling, I'm working on promos, working on my character or whatever, just trying to develop my speaking skills. And, you know, there was a particular weekend where I was in Montreal. And, of course, everything there is, you know, half French, right? Yeah, French language, speaking, writing, you know, it's French, right? So I was traveling with British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, rest his soul, Steve Blackman. And I was on the road. And so we were on the road for a few days, and I was traveling with them. And so I just thought it would be funny to record them bitching and complaining in the car, because, you know, two bodybuilder type guys, you know, on the road for 3-4 days, it just, you know, in a playful way, there's bickering and goofing around and what, you know, just that sort of thing. They were kind of at each other a little bit, kind of joking and trying to throw ribs on each other, just speak, you know, in conversation. So I just thought it would be funny to record them. At the time, thought that was a good idea. Record them, and then I was going to later play it back for them, say, hey, this is what you guys sounded like, you know, the last 3 days. As a joke, it was a rip. That's all it was. And there was a point, though, when I was at the Montreal airport, I think it was, and I had the recorder out, and I was acting like, you know, say this is my recorder, like, hey, Steve Blackman, we're here at the Montreal airport. What do you think of Quebec and all this French stuff going on around here? And I kind of just did that, put it up to his face, and he kind of looked at me funny, like, he goes, hey, I can tell you didn't feel comfortable, right? He goes, hey, you're not recording with that, are you? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, you weren't recording with that in the car or at any other time, were you? And I said, and at that point, that's where I went wrong. I lied. I just flat out said, no, I did. Because I knew at that point, at that split second, and I'm an honest guy, I'm a very transparent person, but at that time, I had to think in a split of a second, oh, what should I say here? Because he doesn't really know me. You know, looking back now, it's a paranoid business. People share sacred, you know, it's a code. It's one of those things where, I mean, if I was who I am today, and I was in a locker room and some rookie guy comes in and I found out he's recording even a rib or not a rib or in wrongful intentions or you know, no harm intended, it would piss me off, and I wouldn't feel comfortable around that person. I wouldn't. So I get it, but it was a really bad look for me, because at that moment I said no. I shut it off, put it in my gym bag, and that was the end of it. I said, well, there goes that rib. I'm not gonna, you know. I knew at that point that they don't know.
He's frozen. Hopefully he'll come back to us here in a second so we can get the rest of this story.
My bag matched that night.
Sorry, Shawn, you froze. You
Yeah.
froze for about 15 seconds there.
Okay, where did I leave off at?
If you could rewind for about 20 seconds, that's where we were.
Okay, here, let me record. Let me rewind on my tape recorder here. Hold on. Okay, actually, okay. I was just checking the text. Sorry. Basically, when I was asked if I was recording or had recorded, where I went wrong, I should have just been upfront and honest right then and there. But I said no, because I knew at that split moment, I said, these guys don't know me. They don't know me like my high school buddies. They don't know me like family. They don't know the goofy, you know, fun-loving Shawn that just has always. I've always documented everything in high school. I was always the one with the video camera, always with tape recorders, always documenting experiences and funny things and skits and imitations and impersonations, right? And so, you know, I just realized, I said, you know, this is just, you know what, just tell them no. And I knew at that point the rib was done. I'm not going to go that route now. So I just turned it off, put it in my bag. Next day, we're at TVs. I'm in, I put my bag in the locker room. I go out to the ring, going over my match for that night, and someone says, Shawn, you got to come back to the locker room, man. It's not good. I was like, what? You know, I had no idea what it was about. I get back there, and all the boys are in the locker room just staring at me, and they had my bag, and I had a bunch of cassette tapes in my bag too. This is back in the cassette deck with the Walkman, you know, cassettes. I had that and had all these cassette tapes. And man, they had gone through them, and there was half of them were smashed and broken. And what had happened is they pressed play on my tape recorder, and they heard their voices on it, right? And Steve and Davey Boy, I guess. And so that was not a good look for me, man. That's essentially the story, man. And it was probably one of the worst times of my life. I was so petrified about losing my job, my dream job with the WWE. That I just felt horrible. I felt awful, man. And I ended up getting fired because of that. I ended up getting fired. And that's essentially the tape recorder story. I mean, it's just a rib gone bad, made me look real bad, bad look for me. You heard the cliche, wrong place, wrong time. It's exactly what that was. The people that knew me believed my story. They knew guys like Glenn Jacobs, I think the Hardys, I think even Edge and Christian, I think they knew me well enough to say that Shawn didn't have any wrongful intent, but it was a stupid thing to do. And it costed me my job. And honestly, Devin, I don't think I ever recovered from that fully with that company. Now, what happened is I ended up getting fired, and man, it was very depressing, a very depressing time for me, because I lost both my mom and dad. I didn't have, you know, any family. I looked at wrestling as a family. I wanted to make that my family. And so when that was taken away from me, I was devastated. And I didn't know WCW was the only viable place that I could possibly go to continue my career and develop my craft. I was still young, still really a rookie then, you know. And I've been in the business for maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years with training. But I was like, I don't know if these guys are going to have me there, because word gets around. It's a small community. But sure enough, I had done an interview with Vince Russo a few years back, and he was part of that. I guess Terry Taylor had come to him and said, Shawn, explain the situation, because everyone had heard, and said, why don't we just bring him in and give him a tryout? And that's when I ended up going to the power plant. That's where I met guys like Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, Mark Jindrak, Mike Sanders, Kiwi, Alan Funk, among some others. And Paul Orndorff was there, you know, running the school at the time. I think Sarge might have still been there. I don't remember now. But that's when I had my second shot at the wrestling world, you know. And I was just so grateful, felt so blessed that the right people in the right places believed me enough to know that that was just a stupid rib gone bad, costing me my job, but they're going to give me a chance and give me a shot with WCW because they saw my talent, they saw the potential, and that's essentially what got me started with WCW. I never wanted to go there. I always wanted to stay with the WWE. That's the place I always called home. That's the only place I had interest in ever working for. But I didn't have a choice. I ended up getting fired. I lost my dream job because of a stupid rib gone bad. Plain and simple, honest to God truth, end of story.
Did any of the wrestlers actually confront you about it directly, or did you just find all the broken equipment?
Yeah, no. I remember Mick Foley in particular came up to me. Even Kurt Angle said, man, because I felt very disrespected. You know, my clothes were torn up. There was shaving cream on my bag. And Kurt said to me, because there's a part of me that's like, son of a bitch, man. Like I want to pop someone in the face. You know what I mean? Like I was pissed off, but I was more so just so concerned and overwhelmed by the fact that I may lose my dream job. And I wanted to just make sure that I could convince everybody that hey man, it was a rib gone bad. And, but Kurt said, don't put it over. Don't just walk up to everyone, shake their hand, all that stuff. And so I you know, and then Mick Foley pulled me aside and he had said, hey man, what happened? Like he wanted to know more in detail, like why did I do that? And what were you thinking and all that? Because I could tell Mick was concerned and he genuinely cared. I felt that he took a liking to me and he just felt bad about the whole situation. So I just told him, this is what I told you. Yeah, and I've heard rumors, I guess, fabricated stories about the tape recorder incident. I've heard it's amazing how people get bits and pieces of information and just blow this thing up into a whole different story. Apparently, I had heard that I was working for Hard Copy, or maybe I was working for WCW and Ted Turner, you know, trying to get information, secret information to get to WCW. I also heard that I was so paranoid, and I admit I was a pain in the ass back then. I was neurotic. I was, you know, insecure. I think what it was when I lost my dad, Devin, shortly before this experience, I don't think I recovered or really healed from his death. You know, I was holding a lot inside. And I think sometimes when you try too hard not to screw up, you end up screwing up. And that's kind of essentially what I did. I labeled myself and I just, I wanted to succeed. I wanted to make my father proud. I wanted to make our family name proud. And so I just put way too much pressure on myself. And, you know, the tape recorder incident was just one of those things where it was just a stupid, dumb move, costing me my job. And, you know, but what I was going to say is that, you know, I've heard, I think everybody's a bit paranoid in that business.
In wrestling, you're not the only one.
There's so many, exactly, because of the nature of that business. No wonder people are paranoid, you know. And I was already kind of a little insecure and had just lost my dad and had all this pressure on myself. because I've tried to make sense of it, you know, and I finally made peace with it years ago and released it, you know, to the universe and said, you know, it is what it is. It's part of my history. It's part of my story. It's something I can share with people. And that's exactly what I'm doing here today with you guys. But, you know, I had heard a story, I think it was Jim Cornette that even said that apparently I was so paranoid, right, that I thought people were talking about me behind my back. So I brought a tape recorder with me and put it in my gym bag so I could just see who was talking about me. Come on, man. You know, now I could see how a story like that could form or develop, you know, but that's the furthest from the truth. The truth is what I've shared today. Now you know.
Yeah, and he's not that credible in my opinion at all. Just one last question kind of related to that. WWE did put your father in the legacy wing of the Hall of Fame for some reason, not the main Hall of Fame for whatever reason. But do you think not having you involved in the induction had anything to do with some people still holding a grudge with you related to the whole tape recorder thing?
Devin, your guess is as good as mine. I'll never know. And I want to shed some light on that because I truly feel now WWE did bring me back over from WCW. I went there for a year and a half. You know what? WCW, I am so grateful for that opportunity. I ended up making more money. I got more TV time, ended up becoming a 3-time World Tag Team Champion, traveled the world, had a lot of fun, and developed my craft, I felt, even further. And I was still in developing stages. You know, pro wrestling, there's a lot of elements to it, as you know, to perfect. And I was still in a developmental stage at that point in my career, you know, just with everything, just with psychology, with just physical mechanics, promos, everything. I was still developing. But I felt confident enough that when the company got bought over, that they would have me back. To me, it was home, back home, WWE. So they did take me over. I was one of the 10 contracts they bought over right away. And I was out one of those bigger contracts like the Goldberg, Stings, maybe the Steiners, I don't know, that sat out on their contracts because they were mega dollars. And that was the smart thing to do, because if they would have come over, they would have broke their contract. They would have stopped getting paid by Turner. So it was a business decision and that's completely understandable. I mean, I probably would have done the same thing. But anyway, I just felt that, okay, I felt confident that I had developed my skills enough that, hey, you know, let's bring him back over. Let's just forget about, let bygones be bygones. Let's do something with this guy. And now when I look back at my career, though, I tried so hard to, you know, elevate myself. I stayed in shape. I was working on even the Planet Stasiak character, which turned out to be a complete flop. My idea and vision of it was completely different than what they projected or allowed me to do, I guess, at the time. And it could have been a big hit. I had merchandise ideas, all kinds of stuff, but it just didn't have the right years, you know. But I thought, okay, if they weren't interested in me coming over, they wouldn't have me come over. But I look back and realized that I think that I was just kind of a cost of doing business. I felt that I was just a business expense. My contract was just a way to do business, because all they did really, I mean, I did some goofy stuff with The Rock and Kurt Angle and Stone Cold with the character running into milk trucks and walls. I was essentially the Wile E. Coyote of the WWE for a while. Again, just thinking, okay, just run with this. You just got back. Just go with the flow, get your feet wet. And then, you know, eventually this will change and just keep working hard. I'm always a believer in working hard, and you'll be rewarded for it. But, you know, in that business, you could work all you want, have a great look, charisma, promo skills. You got everything, a lineage, a legacy, and you'll still, if someone with the pen, the power of the pen doesn't like you, or certain people in their ears, you're not going to go anywhere, man. And I feel like that was probably my situation, honestly. And I'm not pointing fingers. I don't want to sound, boo-hoo, poor Shawn, because if there's anybody to blame for anything, I'm going to point them at myself. There's a lot of things that I could have done differently. And as a man, over the years, I've looked back and reflected on my career and as a man in life. that's what life's about. You live and learn, you make mistakes, you learn from them. So I see why I might have, you know, painted myself in a certain picture to some people, but you think over time that that would be, you know, for, you know, reconsidered, or, you know, I think I was just someone they want to make a laughing stock out of now. And I was just there to feed guys like the Brock Lesnar's of the world that were coming up. I was in shape. I was a bigger guy, had a little bit of a name recognition. So why not feed Brock, one of the bigger, better built people on the roster? Makes him look even stronger. You know, just looking back at my career now. So I don't think they ever did really forgive me for the tape recorder incident. I think it was a stigma and a label that's followed me from day one, or from that point on. And with the WWE Hall of Fame, man, that really, really broke my heart. That really, really, you know, a lot of guys say, don't put it over. Don't, now screw that. I am going to share the authenticity and the truth about how that did affect me. For years, Devin, I campaigned and I promoted my father as, he's the 5th wrestler in the history of the WWE to become champion. He only held the belt for 9 days, but he always told me, he said, Shawn, that was the most happiest 9 days of my life, apart from you being born. And God rest your soul, Dad. You know, he back in his day, he was considered a transitional champion. They wanted to get the title from Pedro to Bruno, 2 baby faces, but they needed a good heel. They needed a strong heel to make the transition. And so there was other heels that were there, but my dad was a good, solid heel and would be the perfect guy to get that piece of business done. And he did. But, you know, here's an original WWE champion, 5th wrestler in the history of the company. Here I am, retired for many years. I go on to become a chiropractor. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I just want to give you, the fans here, a picture of this experience for me. Okay, you don't read about me. You don't. I'm not making negative headlines. You don't. You know, I'm not in drug rehab. I'm not, you know, in pornography. I mean, I'm not trying to crap on anybody, because we all go through our journeys, and we all have, you know, our challenges. And so for those people, I'm making a reference here. I thought I went out and did a good community thing by becoming a community leader and being a healer with my hands as a chiropractor. I also developed a speaking career to light up the hearts and minds and souls of people to help them with their breakthroughs and help them stand in their greatness. Meaning, I feel like my contributions since I've been out of wrestling have been, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, you know, and I'm going to continue making mistakes. But, you know, I feel like I just really got shit on this one, because I campaigned and I promoted for years on social media about, hey, what about Stan the Man? You know, yes, I'm going to be biased. Yes, obviously I'm his son. I'm going to be pushing for him. But don't you think he's worthy of a WWE Hall of Fame induction? I think so. You know, you have all these other people that have made it, and God bless them for that. You know, I'm happy for everybody's success. I really am. But I must be hated or disliked so much in that company. And by the way, I never jumped on the concussion lawsuit. You know how many times I've been approached for this lawsuit, you know, I never jumped aboard that, because for my own reason, I just didn't feel comfortable with it. I didn't feel like I might have suffered some concussions. I know I did, but I might have suffered those from, you know, prior to that. I just didn't feel, for me, ethical to jump on that, you know, that case. Same with the unfortunate Benoit tragedy. You know, I was on, I think it was Fox News, and you know, they're trying to drill me about, well, Vince McMahon, this and that and whatever, and have me try to throw Vince under the bus. I never did, because I'm an honest guy. I'm transparent. I'm going to tell it like it is. And I just, you know, it's unfortunate when it happened. That's a horrible thing that happened. But my point is, if anything, I've had friends say, why are you sticking up for Vince? Why are you sticking up for WWE? And the answer was, because I just didn't have a reason not to just be honest. And I'm just coming from my own experience, you know? So I just felt, though, with what I have done, and again, not to my own horn, but going back to school, you know how hard that was, Devin, to make the transition to go from perform in front of 20,000 people and millions of people on TV back in a classroom taking biochemistry and sitting next to some kids saying, hey man, I played your video game, I played your character last night. Oh, good for you. Okay, yeah. You know, like it was a tough transition, but I got through it, became a chiropractor. I've been serving my community here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for the past 15 plus years. I am currently at Longhorn Injury and Rehab in Dallas for those that are local, so come out and see me. You'll be in great hands more ways than one. I know that was a cheap plug. But when it came down to inducting my dad in the Hall of Fame, I thought that they would have enough class and enough respect to say, hey, let's give Shawn a call. Let's induct him in the Hall of Fame. I don't need Mr. T time on a podium. Give me 5 to 7 minutes, if that. I'll share a couple funny stories. I'll receive this award in my father's honor and in his name and our family name. Good night, thank you, goodbye, right? That never came. I learned about my dad being inducted in the Hall of Fame through Twitter of wrestling fans. I just finished my workout at LA Fitness. I'm in the parking lot and my phone's blowing up and I'm seeing all this congratulations on social media. They're finally putting your dad in. And I knew at that point right then and there, Devin, I said, oh my God, they're not, because the Hall of Fame was like the next day or 2 days from that point. I said, no one's called me. No one's informed me. They're going to go stick him in that legacy wing, because the last 2-3 years prior to that, I would see this wing thing pop up and I said, oh man, I get nervous. And don't destroy his name in that thing. And no disrespect to the legends that are in that wing. But I just felt that my dad deserved just a little bit more, man, than just throwing him in a 20-second video package and stick him in a wing with a video package for WWE's, you know, for a Hall of Fame induction. I never was invited to the arena. No one called me. No one. It was really, truly a spit in the face, and I took it that way. I immediately called Vince. I have his number. You can call him right now. You want to call Vince? Maybe we should call him. What do you think?
That'll get some views. Yeah, sure. Give him a call.
Yeah. So I called Vince, right? Of course, he didn't pick up, and I figured he wouldn't. I mean, it's WrestleMania weekend. And I texted him. I said, Vince, you know, please don't induct my dad this way. Wait till next year when you guys are in New York. I think it's MetLife Arena or Stadium or something. Besides, this was in New Orleans at the time. I think it was 2018, I believe. I think it was 2018 Hall of Fame. I thought, just wait till next, year. You're in New York. It just makes more sense. My dad was a bigger name in that area anyway, right? Just geographically. My dad was a big name everywhere he went. Every territory he went, he was a top guy. He was a top heel for the most part. But I just thought it was appropriate. You're going to be in the New York area. Let's just wait till next year and just give me 5 minutes. Give me 10 minutes. That's it. Let's do this right. And he just texted me back, of course, and said, it's not a, please don't take it personal. It's a company decision. Bullshit. Excuse me. You know what I mean? There's a real deeper reason why someone would do that. I don't buy that's just a company decision. I feel personally it's some personal vendetta. And again, I don't want to sound like an a-hole sitting here saying, pointing fingers or whatever, but it was very, very devastating to me and very, very heartbreaking, man. And it caused me some grief. I was depressed for a couple weeks, man. I think rightfully so, because I just always anticipated what would I say? What stories could I share? I was almost like I wasn't rehearsing, but in my mind, I'd often think about what would I share? What would I tell? What would I share with the wrestling fans, about my father? Maybe a personal story, maybe a funny wrestling story, maybe him and Andre or him and, I don't know, Roddy Piper in Portland days, in Portland, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest days that I grew up on as a kid. And I just thought, because I am a speaker, as you can tell, I have the gift of gab. Devin and I have had many discussions already, and prior to this interview, and we're like, man, this could have been another podcast. We've got like 10 of them now. But yeah, man, that's the Hall of Fame experience for me. So very disheartened. And I'll just end it with this. But I've accepted it. Okay, I've accepted it, and I don't let it consume me. However, as a professional artist and actor, I've been able to compartmentalize things in my life. So I've always thought, I'm always open to the right business. I'm certainly not waiting by my phone to ring. I'll stay in shape the best I can as I get older. And, the wrestling business will always be synonymous with my name. I'll always embrace elements of the business, even though the business has changed. The product is different today. A lot of things doesn't interest me. Some things do. Love the authenticity of the connection with the crowd and real live interactions. Like when CM Punk made his return recently, I thought that was just a beautiful moment. And I shared that with you, Devin. It's those moments that are very far and few between that are so organic and so real. And I love that about professional wrestling, is blurring the lines of reality and a work or a fiction. And when you can intertwine the two, man, that's magic. That's real TV. And all I can tell you is this: if they wanted to do business with me and they wanted to get real fire, they wanted to get real passion, they wanted to get real, boy, I'll tell you, I've got some pent up stuff that's in an archive folder in the deep archives of my mind that could be pulled and delivered, and I think would make for some great ratings. So I'm always open to the right business, but I'm certainly I'm not open to going back to doing anything other than honoring my father, his name, and our family name, and myself, representing that in the name of Stasiak.
Yeah, one interesting thing is they put Abdullah the Butcher in there. He didn't ever even wrestle a match for WWE or wrestle in Madison Square Garden. But Bruiser Brody, they put him in the legacy wing. He feuded with Bruno Sammartino in WWF. And Barbara, his wife, was actually in New York the week that they put Brody in the legacy wing. And they did the same thing to her as they did to you. They didn't even tell her or invite her. So you're not the only one dealing with that crap. Sorry to say.
Devin, you broke up for a while there. I don't know if you heard everything I said, because it was just blank screens on both the monitors, but hopefully you got what I said and finished off with. Were you able to?
Yeah, I got it all. And we'll just finish off with a couple more questions because we'll have you back on again sometime to get into the other stuff. But
Hey, Devin, I'm sorry. I know we're in a bit of a delay here. I apologize. I just want to say and make this perfectly clear, though, okay? I've always said this. I wasn't sure I was going to reveal and share this, this experience of mine with my dad and the Hall of Fame thing. The last thing I ever wanted to come across as, and I certainly hope I am not coming across as that today, is bitching and complaining and whining and feeling sorry for me. It's not like a bitch out session. I'm just sharing the authentic, real truth about this situation and how it affected me. To them, they probably don't give a shit, okay? But, for me, it was very disheartening, as you can imagine. And people that are close to me, it was very disheartening for them too. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that the opportunity that I had with the WWE, they're the ones that got me started with my big dream to want to be a WWE superstar. But I just, and I will always acknowledge that, but I just feel, and there's other stories I have, and maybe we can share that another time. But I just wanted to close out with that whole segment with, I'm not here to bitch and complain, but I wanted to share that, and that's the truth. That's just coming from my heart, how that affected me. So, I say I've released it, and I have, but when I start talking about it, I start getting pissed off. So I'm going to stop talking about it now because it doesn't deserve any more of my time. Anyway, go on, Devin. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that WCW gave you a great push, and you were probably best remembered for your time in WCW. The feud I remember you for was against Curt Hennig. Could you talk about that feud?
Yeah, that was great, man. So blessed and honored to work with Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect. It was during high school. I was in Oakville, back in Oakville, and I was on the phone with one of my buddies, and we're talking about, because we're like senior year, and my buddies are all going to go play football for football scholarships, and I was still looking to try to get a wrestling scholarship to come down to the States here. And long story short, we're watching WWE. One of the shows we're on, and it was a Mr. Perfect match that was on. That when I saw that, not that I hadn't seen Kurt. I met Kurt when I was like a little youngster in Portland, and he was like just starting in the business. He's like 19, 20 years old, 21. He was very young. But, fast forward years later, I used to watch Curt Hennig, and he was one of my idols, as a teenage idol. Just loved his work, loved his character. I think also my dad was great friends with his dad, Larry the Axe Hennig. So I was watching a Mr. Perfect match when I told my buddy, I said, Matt, that's it. The light bulb really went off, and it really reinforced. I'm gonna be a professional wrestler. I'm gonna be a WWE superstar. I don't know if we were saying it back then, WWE superstar, but I said, I'm going to go for this thing. And then, of course, I ran into Kurt when we had one of the NCAA tournaments in Minneapolis. I ran into him there, and we exchanged numbers, and then I stayed in touch with him. And then fast forward another year or two later, I found myself in WCW. With that, you now know the whole transition and how I got there. The first angle I worked, storyline, was with, of all people, Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect. And it was an honor for me, because that was one of my, again, teenage idols growing up watching. And, I remember having a match with him at one of the pay-per-views. I actually, they put me over, and I was, okay, I guess, with that. It's still like, oh, man, I don't know. I better do, as a heel, I better do some chicken shit way of pulling this off, sort of thing, But they had me beat him in his own perfect plex, which no one could do it like him. Mine was crap compared to his. But I felt so uncomfortable doing that. And I told Kurt, I said, I don't feel comfortable doing this. He said, no, don't worry about it. Let's just take care of you tonight. Let's get you over, blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget that. And, I was so uncomfortable, not only like going over on him, but going over on him clean and in his own move. I just thought,
oh, he's freezing up again. Sorry about this, fans.
WWE 2002, and had just a great time with him. I think I lost you again, Devin.
Yeah, we lost you for about 5 seconds, but we got most of it. You were saying that you reconnected with him in WWE after WCW and had a great time.
Yeah, and they stuck us in some tag teams against the Hardys, and I just remember, trying to take my craft seriously, but in the ring, he would be laying down on the mat, selling, looking up at me, making faces. I almost, laughed a few times. Like, he was a big prankster, he's always liked to have fun. So, gave me a very comforting feeling to be, I felt like family with him, I felt like an older brother or something. Just because of the history with my dad and his dad, meeting him when I was a little kid, my dad knowing Kurt when he was just a little boy, So it had a family feel to it. It was an honor for me to work with the great, Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect.
Now, the last controversial thing I'll ask you about today, because I've heard several people talk about this, so maybe you could set the record straight, was during the invasion angle, supposedly there was a rumor that you leaked some information about it that caused the WrestleMania moment that they were planning with you guys not to happen, and instead they just sat you guys up in a box or something. Have you heard about these accusations?
Yeah.
And what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, this is another bit of a fabricated story. It's amazing, how this happens, but just human nature, just the way it is. So back then, that was in 2001, I think. Yes, I think it was 2000. 2001 was when WCW got purchased over during the invasion angle. Back then, we didn't really have, I don't think we had social media at all. So we were just left with flip phones and doing old school radio interviews to promote things, market our business, whatever. In this case, WWE. Well, so yes, I did do a local radio interview with one of the popular radio stations there in Tampa. And they were asking me questions about, hey, you know, WCW just got purchased. You're part of this invasion thing or whatever. Or I don't know if they were even calling it invasion at that time. I don't remember the specifics, but I just remember the
Uh-oh, there seems to be a connection issue, fans, and I'm sorry about this.
I felt, hey, I'm back with WWE. I'm going to promote.
One second. We lost you for a second. We lost you for a second again.
You disappeared again, Devin.
Yeah, we lost you just as you were saying about the radio station appearance.
Yes. Yeah, so I got on this radio station. I did this interview. I think I'm doing a good thing. I'm promoting for my company. I'm talking about WrestleMania and who's, you know, at the time it was me and Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, Stacy Keibler, Mike Awesome, you know, and some others that were coming over. Nobody told me, or anybody, I don't know about anybody, no one told me that they wanted us to stay dark. Like, don't share this with don't do interviews, don't do any media. Johnny Laurinaitis, and I'm not trying to throw Johnny under the bus, but he was kind of took us under his wing. He was kind of in charge with the WCW talent coming over to WWE during the invasion angle, or when we first got bought over. And he was more or less kind of assigned to us. But he never once said, Shawn, or anybody that I heard him saying, don't do any interviews, don't do any media. Here I am doing this interview, right, thinking I'm promoting the company, WWE, WrestleMania, and it was probably one of the worst things I could have done in their eyes at the time, because I was at WrestleMania in Houston. I'm in the hotel room. This is how long it took. It was like a delayed reaction. The time that it got to me that that was a no-no, I was in the hotel getting ready to go down to the lobby to get picked up in a shuttle with the rest of the crew, right, to be taken over to I think it was the Astrodome at the time, to be put up in this box, or to the arena anyway. We were put up in that box, but maybe we were supposed to do something else. Apparently, we would have had more involvement or something, perhaps. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. But I get a phone call from Johnny saying, Shawn, did you do an interview with such and such in Tampa? I said, yeah. Why did you do that? And it just went off. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, no one told me I wasn't supposed to do any media or interviews. No one said nothing, right? You would think that it was that important. Devin, if you and I were running a company and we had talent, right, and we want to have something that's special secret, wouldn't we make it real clear to the talent, hey, do not make any phone calls, no emails, stay off social media, don't do any interviews? None of that ever happened. So I almost didn't even make it back the second tenure. I was almost fired before I could come back from my first tenure when I was fired. I was like, I can't get nothing right with this company. And I hadn't stepped on WWE's soil yet. I was still in my hotel room. But somehow they said, come on down, we'll work something out, stuck us in a box. And you saw that was my WrestleMania moment, by the way. That's the only WrestleMania moment that I've ever had, by the way. About 5 seconds on a camera with a bunch of guys in a box. There you go.
Now, I know you're friends with Brian Clark. You helped hook me up with the interviews with him. You also won the Tag Team Championships in WCW from him one of the times. Could you share some thoughts about him, because he seems like a really good guy?
Yeah, I've always liked Brian. We didn't get a chance to know each other real well back then, but even back then, we took a liking to one another. There's certain guys that you just know when you first meet. You get to know, you say, hey, this is a good cat, man. You know, you feel comfortable around that person. And so he was one of them. Same with Brian Adams, and God rest his soul too. But yeah, I enjoyed working with those guys. Chronic at the time. We had I thought some good matches for what we were given at the time. But it's funny because I always stayed in touch with Brian periodically. The odd text, you know, that thing that happened with the Hall of Fame. I was so distraught over that and so bothered by it that I did reach out to him, and we spoke about it. And he was, you know, very supportive of that situation. And then, you know, fast forward a couple more years, just recently this year, maybe 6-7 months ago, towards I think the beginning of this year or in the spring, when you and I started talking, Devin, I had reached out to Brian and had a question about, you know, action figures, because he seems that he really has that down well with his line, with his merchandise, and you should check all that stuff out. I don't know all his handles, but I'm sure they can watch the interview and he's plugged that. So if you're looking for merchandise, dolls, goggles, footballs, Nerf balls, T-shirts, all that stuff, you can find out where that's at. But yeah, we just reconnected, and honestly, it's crazy. I feel like he feels like family to me. We reconnected and kind of created this bond now, and we almost talk every day on social media. We do the private messaging on Facebook, which I said, let's switch over to WhatsApp, because you know me, I'm long-winded. I get cut off a lot after a minute. You're probably already experienced that yourself, Devin. But that's why I'm a speaker, right? I figure I talk a lot. I might as well get paid doing it, right? And delivering some good stuff, of course. But yeah, I've learned more about Brian over the last 6 or 7 months that I never knew when we worked together. And so I call it a brothership. I'm grateful for our reconnecting and our support. And, you know, of course, I'm working out and doing 2-a-days, and I got him doing 2-a-days, and we try to inspire each other, you know, more or less. So it's been a nice brotherhood. Brian's a great guy. He's a really good soul, good person.
You worked with Stacy Keibler in WCW, who went on to date George Clooney and get some fame in mainstream media. How was your experience with her?
Oh, you know, Stacy was really young when she worked with me and with, you know, the companies, WWE and WCW, of course, before that. She was always really cool. I enjoyed working with her. You know, I didn't realize how young she was when she's like in her early 20, like 20, 21. I didn't realize how young she was. But of course, I was in my early 30s at the time. But she was always, you know, very beautiful girl, you know, head to toe. But she, what's I like about some of these female talents, and of course, today, there's some tough chicks, man. I mean, that are workers now, right? But, you know, for a girl that was kind of brought in, I think, just to be a manager, and for her physical presence, being as pretty as she is, she had a really cool vibe about her, and just a very, she's just pleasant to be around. She was fun to work with, easy to work with, and that's, you know, pretty much the extent of my memory of Stacy. I ran into her back in 2007, I want to say, for an autograph signing, and she had just done Dancing with the Stars, and I had caught a couple glimpses of that, and I just told her how proud I was of her. I think it's pretty impressive when people can, you know, reinvent themselves, wear different hats, and succeed at that, you know. So she was able to get, I guess, you know, leave wrestling and go do something that's pretty damn hard. I hear to Dance with the Stars is no joke. I heard some people say it's the hardest thing they've ever done. He's like world-class athlete, so it must be pretty tough, you know.
Now, speaking of the divas, I don't know if you ever messed with any of the divas or Nitro girls or female talent, but that's one of the questions the fans like to know about.
No, I get that a lot. No, just all working relationship. You know, I didn't want to mix, you know, business and personal. You know, when I dated, it would be people outside of wrestling. You know, or you know, I dated a gal one time that had been married to a wrestler that understood the business. So you know, it's one of those things. I see why wrestlers, you know, men and women wrestlers date one another, because they're in the business, they understand it, so they get it. But it takes a real special person that's not in the business to date a wrestling talent, because of the lifestyle, the traveling, the being gone all the time, just the, you know, the limelight and everything. You got to be a pretty secure person, and I would hope that the relationship is trustworthy and it has integrity, that there's you know, that it's pretty solid, that it can sustain a wrestling career, and that person be supportive. But I never mixed personal and business. I always kept that always professional.
Someone's bringing up that you had a lot of matches with Randy Orton when he was first starting out. Any memories of that? He's obviously gone
Yeah.
on to have a pretty successful career. I think he makes something like $4 million a year now.
Wow, good for him. Yeah. Yeah, I was put on some house shows with him. In fact, when I went to Canada, one tour, I think I told you my plane ride from hell coming back from New Brunswick. You remember that story? Check out our segment I did for all you fans out there. I did a segment with Hannibal a couple weeks back with my version of the plane ride from hell. And
YouTube is censoring it. It was so controversial that they've decided to freeze him so he can't
get in the
talk about
office,
it.
Andy, because he was a young pup then. I think he was like 22. I think I might have lost you again, Devin. I don't know. We keep having technical. I told you you'll never meet anybody that has more technical issues than me, right? I'm telling you, it's my spiritual energy. It's so damn strong. It's interfering with the Wi-Fi signal. Randy Orton, took him under my wing for a trip to Canada. Had him back at my place in Tampa. He was just hanging out with me for a while. I put him on the road with me. Ate up all my food. Slept on my couch, and we had good matches. I felt we flowed real well. He was a real young, real rookie back then, but he was really great athlete, smooth as glass, good chemistry. I would have loved to have had worked a program with him. Hey man, never say never. Again, I'm not waiting by my phone, but he's a legend killer. I support legends. I'm all about tradition and legacy. So I don't know, man. I think we would have had a great storyline. We could have made a lot of money together. I still believe that now.
Now, there's been so much talk about the WWE backstage bullying in the early 2000s. You were older at that time when you were in WWE, but did you either experience any of that or witness any of it? I know that you wrestled JBL before, who was known as one of the big bullies back there at the time.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Ironically enough, I was just watching an interview with Rick Bassman, and JBL was on there. I think you were coordinating that or part of that somehow. Anyway, I saw with Boss Rutan and Butterbeam and Sean Ray, and JBL came on. Who am I missing out? There's someone else there. I think that's it, Rick Bassman. But, you know, John, you can tell, is older and seems like he's grown a lot and matured. You know, I think so what John said, though, back there is just part of the culture, and that's true. You know, that's for some people can handle it. Some people can't. There's been a few times that he would joke with me too. You know, whenever there was a point though that came about, as in England, as a matter of fact, and I felt that I was kind of being pushed a little bit. So I had to, you know, as a man, I had to stand up for myself, and I had to question if there's a real problem with me, because if there is, then if it's something we have to handle and take care of, well, let's just get it done. But apparently it was just nothing more than just playing around. No big deal. I like you. We worked matches together, the hardcore matches, and I'll be honest, I enjoyed working with JBL. I thought, again, he's a little snug, and I like snug. You know, take care of your opponent. But yeah, we had some. You know, we had one of those, couple of those, I don't know what matches you would call them, but you're using, you know, utensils and stuff in the ring, smashing over each other's head, that kind of stuff. Maybe no holds barred matches. I actually enjoyed working with JBL. I would say I was never bullied by him or really anybody. I think some hard joking here and there that could be taken that way, but I didn't take it that way. I had pretty thick skin, and I kind of was on to him, and I felt deep down when push came to shove, I got to know him like as a person, and he's actually a pretty good guy.
Not to mention, he got out of football because of bad knees, and you're an amateur wrestler, so you would have had those leg attacks if it had come down to it.
Well, yeah, talk is cheap, right? But, you know, I'll leave it at that.
Now, I'll wrap it up here. There was a fan earlier that had a good question I just wanted to bring up. He said that your dad worked a lot with the original Sheik, and he wanted to know if you ever met the original Sheik. He's a very popular subject on this channel.
You know, Devin, I don't know if I met the original Sheik. I don't remember, unless I was a little toddler at the time, and my dad, you know, might have, who knows, in passing behind backstage, or maybe at someone's house or whatever, you know, because wrestlers interact and families interact. So I don't know. I don't recall meeting the original Sheik, but I remember my father having a very high regard and respect for the original Sheik. It always, certain wrestlers stood out in my mind of my dad's era, because my dad would talk about them so highly regarded, right? And the Iron Sheik, the original Sheik, was definitely someone that he respected and had great matches with back in the day. Another wrestler that really stands out, and speaking of, you know, these names, would be High Chief Peter Maivia, The Rock's grandfather. My dad had they were friends, and he had a very high level of respect for the High Chief. I think most people did, but those are the two names that really stand out. It's ironic you mentioned the original Sheik, because that's one of them, and High Chief Peter Maivia is the other one that my dad seemed to talk about a lot in a positive, respectful manner.
And I'm sure we'll have a part two, but to close this off, you mentioned you've been talking about your dad off and on here the whole time, but for fans that are newer and not necessarily familiar with your father's career, do you want to just say something about your father? And we can get into it more in a future interview, but we've talked about why he should have been in the Hall of Fame, but we haven't really gone into some of his accomplishments. Of course, he was known for the legendary heart punch that I don't really remember seeing you ever do that. So maybe he didn't want to get you in any trouble.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If I were to ever do any kind of business in wrestling, I think that's something that I would be very interested in embracing and bringing back, because there's been many attempts for those to throw the heart punch. There's been Bryan Adams, Crush. There's been Ox Baker. There's been a couple others even that have tried to mimic the heart punch, but there's only one way, Devin, that the heart punch is thrown in a real manner and fashion, the most effective way, and that's the Stasiak way. Yes, my dad was the inventor and the founder of the heart punch, at least in professional wrestling. One of the rumors was he was the first man to knock down Andre the Giant. I don't know how true that is, but you know what? I'll believe that stat. But yeah, my father, you know, my memories of him were that everywhere he went, of course, he was larger than life to me, more ways than one. He was a big man, you know, 6'5", 300 pounds. And he didn't have a great physique. He wasn't a body guy, but he was just a brawler. And my dad would give his shirt off his back. He was, the boys loved him. He was so fun to travel with. I learned a lot about my dad after he had passed, and I got into the WWE, and I'd hear stories from guys like Pat Patterson and Jack Lanza. These guys became agents, of course, with the company, and would just share stories with me. And I'd learn that wrestlers, the boys, would argue and fight over who Stan Stasiak was going to ride with for the next 300-mile trip to the next town, because they knew that when my dad was in the car with them, that trip would go by so quick because he'd have them laughing the whole time. So my dad was a prankster. He told the best stories. As far as on a professional level, he was very professional. Everywhere we went, you know, when we traveled, back in my day, we traveled what was called the Territory Days. So right here in Dallas, Texas, we had come through here in the early 80s, Sportatorium right down. Well, it's not there anymore. It's just a field. But the Sportatorium here in Dallas was huge. The Von Erichs, of course, they were like gods here. Portland, Oregon, Pacific Northwest, Don Owens territory, Roy Shires in San Francisco. There was I think Paul Bosch in Houston. There, of course, you know, Vince McMahon Sr. in the northeast corner of the states, and then of course Vern Gagne, the Gagnes in Minnesota. So there was all these territories, but everywhere my father went, I just remember him being one of the main guys. He was always one of the top guys, and usually a heel. You know, he was a baby face in Portland. I remember that. very beloved. Wherever we went on the weekends, that we go out to eat or go to the store or a mall, whatever, he was always bombarded with pictures and autographs, and always so kind with fans. But again, he was just more of a big brawler and just didn't have a whole lot of great moves, but he just had this menacing look and presence about him. They always say when my dad entered a room, or certain people, Devin, I mean, you could be 7 feet tall and still not have a particular presence. But my father exuded a presence, an energy that you just knew someone was special that was in the room, you know? And he made people feel, a lot of the boys felt comforted when he was around. So he was just a man's man, good old boy, and liked to drink his beer and brawl. He was a brawler. Of course, 5th wrestler in history to WWE become champion. He won the Pacific Northwest championship many times over, as well as the tag team championships. He won the Texas Brass, and everywhere we went, he held some kind of belt. So he was a very highly regarded heel in his day.
Well,
and I miss him very much.
My dog's coming up to say hi to you. Is there anything you want to plug here before we go off? You've already mentioned your YouTube channel. I know you have several Facebook pages and a Twitter. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say I do miss my father very much, but I feel his presence. And I told you, Devin, I said my dad would have really liked you. I said that to you a couple months back. Just the cloth that you're cut from and where you come. And plus, you're Canadian, man. Come on, right? As Canadians, I'm half Canadian, so my half side's connected with your full side being Canadian. But yeah, my social media handles, it's Dr. Shawn 008. So DRSHAWN 008 for Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, which is just my personal, is Shawn Stasiak -Stipich. If you go to my YouTube channel, I have all my links listed there. Trying to build that too, guys. I love subscribers, love view the videos, comment, share, like, all that. Hit the bell notification. But that's Shawn Stasiak's World. Check it out and follow me on social media. And I will keep you posted, Devin, on the phobia projects and anything else related, man. We'll be in touch. I really appreciate you having me on and give me the opportunity to get some truth out there and kind of smash all these fabricated stories and rumors, and hopefully some of my stories you guys enjoyed. And I know I rambled a bit, but hey, it is what it is, right?
The fans seem to have enjoyed it, so I appreciate the time, and you can close this off however you want.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to I'm feeling left out because every time you do interviews, I see Piper there jumping. You have this love, and she jumps on your lap almost every interview. And then Brian had his dog. Your dogs met each other. I think I need to get a dog. I think that's what's left next on the agenda, on the list. I love French bulldogs. I had an assistant that I worked with that has a dog. They're like kids, though, man. You got to take care of them. There's a lot of maintenance, right? But maybe next time you see me, I'll have a dog in my lap, Devin. Who knows?
Very good. Looking forward to that. Thanks a lot, fans.
Oh, hey, did you want to get a shot? I wanted to close it off by saying goodbye. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and